GATSBY Fridays, a show about getting the best out of a creative life from two creative directors working around the world and based in New York City.
I'm your host, Alex Tremilio.
And I'm Sarah Semi.
Today we'll be talking about self-care and creativity.
We'll talk about self-care in the creative space, maintaining momentum between passion and professional projects, the resources we use to push ourselves through creative blocks.
And at the end of each episode, we'll make a signature cocktail to toast cheers to you.
So hang with us as we discuss self-care and creativity. I'm your host, Sarah.
And I'm Alex. And this is GATSBY Fridays.
Alex, before we get into our topic, let's do a check-in. How are you and what are you wearing?
I am feeling good. Finally, it is not humid outside, and it is not 99 degrees outside.
First up, New York City.
Oh my goodness. So it was actually pleasurable to walk around. I actually took a little bit of a longer walk to get to the studio today. I'm wearing a band t-shirt. So for those who don't know me, I have a lot of band t-shirts. This one says Madness in yellow letters on a gray bar. And this is from the Weeknd's tour that was the Madness that he did in Brooklyn. And I got to see him in Madison Square Garden. I love this shirt. It was a great concert. Travis Scott opened for him. Travis Scott is straight fire. I'm wearing blue jeans and some running shoes. Sarah, how are you and what are you wearing?
I'm doing good. We're starting early this week, so I like this high energy Monday going in through the week. I'm wearing a basic white V-neck and baby blue summer denim and white sneakers. I just needed to be comfortable today.
It's comfortable. Were you okay today walking around?
Oh my God, it's so nice out. There was like a little bit of a storm this weekend, and if you went out right before the storm,
Yesterday.
it did not feel like, on Saturday evening, it did not feel like July or August in New York. It was chill. There was a breeze, and it was not a hot, stinky, dusty breeze. It was so nice. So yeah, the weather's feeling great. I just felt like, it's a simple day, simple outfit. It's a classic I go to all the time. It makes me feel good.
Excellent.
Alex, how does your mental wellness play a role in your professional life, and what are the challenges?
So, this is a big subject matter that we decided to kind of tackle in this week's episode. I thought about it for a long time, and I thought about my own personal well-being and process and how that has dictated the course of my professional career. I think I want to come to this from the perspective of knowing what your boundaries are. And what I mean by that, oftentimes as creatives, I think we get caught up. I'll speak for myself. I get caught up in not having parameters. When I know where the boundaries are, I know how far I can take an idea.
What do you mean? Is it in terms of time, effort, concentration? What boundaries are you specifically talking about?
So there are two types of boundaries. There's the boundaries that are imposed on you by the client or the project that you're doing.
Or life in general.
Or there are also life boundaries as well. But I think if you're doing creative work on your own, you tend to not give yourself boundaries. Those are sometimes the things that I have trouble with, because I could keep on going on a theme, I could keep on going on an idea, I can keep on going on a creative mode that has no end. Sometimes that's not good. I want to make sure that I have boundaries to work up against, to also know not only where things end, but where things need to be done, so I know how to gain perspective looking back at something.
How does going on without a boundary impact how you're feeling?
For my own process, if I keep on going, not knowing the end, it's not necessarily not knowing the end, it's just not knowing where those boundaries are. It could be a little bit nerve-wracking to not figure out how to stop something. And what I mean by that, if you don't know how to stop a process or you're working on a piece. Where does the piece end? You're working on a composition. Where does the composition end? Where you're working on a song. Where does the song end?
That's one of my favorite anecdotes, actually, I bring up all the time. And you might have heard this a million times already.
No, go ahead.
When I was doing my master's thesis, I was so over it. Usually master's theses are 2 semesters at Art Center. When I was doing it, they changed it after us. but it was 3 semesters. So by the end of the third, you're over a year that you've been working on this thing. I want to be done with it. I want to graduate. I want to move on to the next thing because I'm tired of working. I'm bored from working on the same thing. So one of my thesis advisors was Sean Donahue. I was like, Sean, is this enough to graduate? Is this enough amount of work? And he goes, Sarah, it's not a quantity. It's a deadline. I will never forget this because as designers, as creatives, you want to create till the end of time. And what you do before the deadline is what matters.
Yes.
So I agree with you. The limitations define what you do, but for me, it's less of an anxiety-ridden thing. For me, I need those limitations to be creative about.
Exactly.
Right?
I could work on a theme for a long time. I could definitely continue a theme until the end of time, yes.
No, for me, I need those parameters to come up with ideas to even work on anything.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
My process, I don't have this need to constantly put things out into the world. I need ideas and a purpose. I need parameters to even be creative about. I need these tangents to come up with a composition. For me, I can come to a painting and look at it and say, okay, I don't want to put another brushstroke on this. So I have that. But for me to even start painting, I need to know what I'm putting on paper. So this kind of just shows that how different we are in our creative processes.
And I'm the opposite. I can keep on going until there's no space on the paper. Also, I think it's...
But you start. I don't even start until I know what I'm putting on there.
I'll just start an idea, I'll just start a concept or a painting or whatever have you, or design, and I'll just keep on going until I run out of space or add another sheet and keep on going on that until I run out of ink. But that's,
So that's what I think the interesting thing that we came up with in this particular question is you need the parameters to stop your creative process versus I need those parameters to start mine.
That's good. That's good.
I mean, it just goes to show that creativity is not one size fits all. It's not something that what I think is the best process for me clearly is the exact opposite for you.
Does it give you anxiety it must give you some form of anxiety to not know what those parameters are, and what do you do with that?
So yes, I have this need that I want to do things, but I have anxiety to get started. Like putting that first stroke on the paper, that's my anxiety. Putting the stroke, and then the next stroke, and then the next stroke. And this is somewhat metaphorical in the sense that, not everything is a stroke on paper, but I also do paintings on paper that I can't start until I have this, like, okay, I want this type of composition where I can come in and start building organically. And that was one of the challenges that I tackled during the quarantine painting episodes that we talked about in our first episode. The anxiety that I get is I have all these ideas. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to start. And then, they keep cooking in my head. And it takes a lot of literally pulling teeth, it comes out physically out of my body to put it on paper kind of effort.
And I'm the opposite. I will start something, whether it's we seem to be talking about painting, but also if it's my quarantine project as well, I'll keep on going until I run out of material, literal material to work in, and then I got to buy more, and then I come up against the whole dilemma of having too much material and not using it as much. But it's interesting that we both have two different perspectives. It's good.
I mean, it just goes to show that creativity isn't something that can be defined for one person is different for the other. I think that's part of the challenge of not being able to find solidarity in your particular process. And that's why sometimes I feel like we feel isolated even when we're surrounded by creatives. The fact that my process is so different than yours. Yes, we find support in each other, but at the same time, you don't suffer the same way I do.
And that causes anxiety within artists and having these contrasting processes, which all artists probably have.
Yes.
Right now, we're going to take a break. In this week's episode, we're talking about wellness and creativity. This is GATSBY Fridays.
Hello, and welcome back to GATSBY Fridays. Alex, let's talk about how balancing your creative passions and professional progress has impacted how you create things.
So, two different approaches. When it comes to the professional projects, once again, it's a whole issue of boundaries. And when you're working professionally, you have those boundaries. You have the boundaries that come with the project, number one, that you're doing, who you're doing the project for, what the budget is for that particular project.
Okay, so I think I want to distinguish that you call them boundaries. I call them constraints of the project.
Okay. Do you consider constraints a positive?
I consider it in a positive way because a positive in a roundabout way.
Okay. Talk to me.
Of course, you want more budget for your project.
Of course.
So
but that's
the
not,
fact that the
not
budget
case.
is limiting is not necessarily a positive thing. But I do believe the limitations that are imposed on us by the circumstances, by life, by the project, the budget, the expectations of the client, they do force us to come up with more interesting solutions that we wouldn't have if we were left to our own devices.
Forces you to be more creative.
Yes.
Okay.
Because, like, give me all the time in the world and all the budget in the world, and I'm like, okay, so what do we do now? I'm not, like,
you know. That's where man, if I had all the time and the budget in the world, that'd be great.
Yes, we always want more budget, but in terms of the concept, like, you have to work within this, like, subject matter, and then you have to work within these rules within that. A good example is there's a movie, Andy Garcia plays this Cuban jazz musician, Arturo Sandoval, who used to make American jazz in Cuba before the Cuban Revolution. And once the revolution comes into play, he's no longer allowed to make the American jazz. So he created an entire new genre of Cuban jazz because he couldn't make the music that he loved, which was American jazz. The Cuban Revolution wanted to only promote Cuban arts, and they were very good about promoting Cuban art and Cuban message and revolutionary message, but it was within those constraints you had to. So the movie starts with Andy Garcia's character Arturo Sandoval at the embassy having this interview where he's trying to make his case for refugee status, and the guy who works at the consulate goes, well, you seem to have benefited because Arturo Sandoval won Grammy Awards that he was not allowed to travel to the United States to even receive because of the political constraints, because they were worried that he would escape Cuba, basically. But the man created this entire genre of music because he wasn't allowed to play the American jazz, which is what he loved. He was miserable. He hated every minute of it. But he would never have created this genre of Cuban jazz if he was just left keep playing the American music that he was handed down because he loved it so much. It's the tortured soul of the artist, maybe. But it made him miserable, but he created his whole thing. So basically the guy at the consulate goes like, you seem to have benefited from this limitation that was imposed on you. So how do you think that qualifies you for this hardship? For me, I agree with that. My entire career has been defined about creating within the boundaries that were imposed on me, and I thrive within that.
It seems like with his story, I mean, these were first. I would never want those circumstances to be creating anything because I would never want to deal with an authoritarian regime to force art out of me.
Of course, it's an extreme scenario, but I like that it really highlights that constraints force creativity in a way.
But I feel like just to create. Ideally, I would love to create without boundaries, but I understand the necessity for boundary, and it's not a hindrance. We work professionally, and we work whether it's client-based work or whether it's full-time employed through an employer. You still need to kind of adhere to what the guidelines or what it is that you have to do for the job, and I still create within those parameters. The anxiety that I feel is that it could be more. Everything could always be more.
I mean, I think that's why that whole quote about it's a deadline, it's not a quantity, is you need to know when to stop. So you need to do your best before that deadline.
I constantly think of a what-if scenario. What if I had more budget? What if I had more time? What if I had more? How amazing this could be. And I understand that sometimes I have to get that out of my own head. This is an episode about wellness and mental well-being.
No, I find it interesting though, because what you're saying and what I'm saying are kind of the same thing. The anxiety of what if I didn't have these boundaries, I would have done so much more, but I need those boundaries to get the creative output going, versus you already have the output, you just need to define it. And either way, our anxiety both comes from what if we had more time? What if we had more money? What if we didn't have to operate within this?
Do you think those constraints? Do you think those constraints make you more creative?
I do, because okay, so you had to stop with this project because the budget stopped you there. There's always a next project. this is what we do. So I'm not like at a loss. The things that break my heart in terms of not having to come to realization are missed opportunities more than projects that flourished within constraints.
And I think I wish I had more time to do something to really make some. I'm not going to say that I'm not satisfied completely with a work or a project that I've done. It's just that I always think it could be better. It could be more.
It can always be better. I think, but that's the creative's curse.
Something, and that's where the that's where the mental wellness needs to kick into effect.
I think the best thing that I've learned over the years is, and this is like a life lesson, not just necessarily specific to my creative process, is I can't control what happens. I mean, look at the world right now. Exactly. Like anything that you had going on that you planned, invested in, and you were working on it, there's a global virus and pandemic happening, and no one has control over it. And we still haven't grasped bigger impact it's got on everything in the world. So you have no control over that. The only thing you have control over is how you react to what's happening. So one thing that this is a personal challenge for me in many aspects of life, but also impacts my creative process because I have no control over what the client's preferences are. I have no control over what the budget is going to be. I'm not the one putting up the money. I have no control over what my immigration status is going to be, so I don't get to control those things. I only control what I can do within those parameters to do my best and how I embrace what's in front of me. Because I can stop my feed and complain about it till the end of time, but that's not constructive and that's not productive.
Those challenges are the same challenges that I feel as well, with a caveat, or with the difference for me is that I can dictate the course of what an image is to some extent, and move that idea of that image forward. I'm not saying it's a luxury, it's a benefit that I have for the work that I do. For my situation, I'm able to give my work that. I could tell them what this should be. Of course.
So explain that a little bit more, because you're talking about this bigger production. You're talking about your current professional
work, yes.
So you work with a team, that you hire the talent. So yes. You have a budget to hire the people that you want to work with.
And within those people, I hire people who know their craft, who know the job that they're supposed to be doing, with the larger goal that I create for the bigger idea that we all need to strive for. I don't try to micromanage too much and tell people what to do because they're hired for their expertise, but I steer the ship to land. I don't need to be using sailing analogies.
You're using sailing analogies. Yeah. I'm using orchestra analogies. Like there's a lot of this, right? Yeah, you're running the show and you have this vision, and they are there to use their expertise to bring that vision and create a wholesome presence for the brand that you all work for.
But with you, because you do creative direction as well, there is some amount of your ideology that has to play into the project. Every project I work on has a little bit of me in it.
Of course.
Because that's what I know. Uh-huh. That's who I know, and I always work towards that goal within the parameters that I am dealt with.
Your work has to, of course, reflects your vision because you are the creative director. That's why you are in that position. You have this vision and you hire the people that are best suited to bring that into light. I work in a smaller team with a much smaller budget usually, and I see again, like I wish I had the budget to hire the talent that I wish I could work with. But most of the time, yes, the projects I put out there, I may not have literally sat down and crafted the corners of that logo myself with my own little trackpad, but I have guided the vision that it reflects. I think that's when you come to the position of creative director versus being the designer of the project.
You make amazing work within those parameters, within those constraints. It's making me think of a time where I remember being in film school. I'm in school with kids who have resources of upwards of tens of thousands of dollars to do their projects. I didn't have those resources. I remember, my constraints were a couple of $100. My professor telling me the less money you have, the more creative you need to be. And I took that to heart and I wondered about that. And I've used that. Now that I'm in a position to have a little bit more resources, I guess I've sometimes forgotten about that philosophy that I need to take more to heart.
But you do. That doesn't mean that you don't put heart into your projects.
No.
You have the budget.
It's not the heart. It's not the heart. It's just that I get upset, I think, because there's more that could always be accomplished.
Of course, there's always limitations. And you're the creative director, but you also have a boss that has a vision, that you are also working within this existing brand's vision, and you have to align yours within that brand to have done the job. I keep saying, I didn't do a good job with my projects if my client wasn't happy. Because at the end of the day, they didn't hire me to design a logo, they hired me to design their logo. And if they're not happy with the results, then I didn't do my job. Because part of our job is read the requirements of what needs to be communicated. This was a hard-learned lesson for me. We have this whole idea of oh my God, I'm going to do my own I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to go out on my own, and I'm going to make all the rules. There's no such thing. At the end of the day, whether it's a boss or a client, you're not the one signing the checks. You're not the one that's assigning the project that has the needs. So whatever the project needs comes from the client. The client signs the check. The client signs my freelance or project-based check. Your boss signs your salary check. At the end of the day, we are not the ones that are paying someone else to do it. So then we're not the ones that own it. The client and boss are interchangeable. No one has, we don't have the final word. But I also don't mean it in terms of I don't mean it in a way that oh God, I don't get to do what I want to do. They hire me because they believe in my vision.
Of course.
And you got the job because you showed the talent to bring what they didn't have on the table
to light.
Yes. Exactly. So it's not to say that we don't have the power. It's just there's another level of decision making, which is another constraint in a way, right? It's either budget or terms of what the concepts are, or the boss liking it, or the client liking it. I recently pitched 3 directions for a brand new branding project, and the one that I felt most strongly about is, of course, it didn't get picked because it's the one that's a little bit more out there, but then that's not always the case. We went with the more traditional because it's also healthcare. It's a little more traditional. Last summer, I took a huge risk pitching an agency that represents directors who do ads, and I pitched a marketing idea for them because they wanted their marketing materials to reflect moving images. And I'm like, well, PDF is meant to print, so it's never gonna look good when you start embedding movies in it. We can do GIFs, it's still gonna be janky. It's never gonna look nice to the aesthetics of what the work that your directors are putting out into the world. It's not going to be reflective in terms of quality of it.
Yes.
So I pitched them an idea of, we'll make a basic 1-page marketing PDF for you, but you will always direct them to a site. That 1 page is dedicated to these people, your audience, whoever you're pitching, your Korean business developers that's going to invest in this Korean beauty, or your local, new brand that's going to launch at Target. Each one of these marketing audiences have different needs and different aesthetics. A website, we can create a modular system where you can drag and drop certain items, and they loved it. It was so out there. But guess the difference is, they're a creative agency representing creatives. So they were very interested and receptive to what I had to offer, versus a healthcare brand is always going to go with the conservative and the one that seems solid and makes sense to them, which is not surprising. But these are the joys of navigating this system. I don't feel frustrated he didn't like my first, best favorite idea. I had a feeling he wasn't going to go for that, So that's just the general, once you realize that this is the course of how you create things, your boss doesn't like the final model that you pick.
Trash and burn.
It's part of the game, right? It's part of how this works. And it's there's no point in resisting it because people have preferences. And what we create, if it doesn't make people happy that we're serving with our creative output in the professional world, it's not going to make them happy. And the more you bang your head against and I'm not allowed to create what I want, you're trying to change the circumstances. You can't. And that's going to create a lot more anxiety than you can solve within yourself.
And ultimately, that's the goal, to not only satisfy the needs of the client, but also satisfy the needs of an overall vision that client or your employer presents to you, to make sure that not only that they're happy, to make sure it satisfies the needs of what the project was.
And at the end, I feel like I'm more proud of the project when the client's happier with it, even though I feel like, we could have done this, it would have been so much better. There's always what ifs anyway.
Yes.
So I feel like I'm more proud of it and say, listen, I did this and they loved it. That gives me more satisfaction at the same time. But when it comes to my personal projects, to bring it back to the original question that we had, personal projects I have so much more problem with because I want to do everything.
Yes.
And then that's when that anxiety that you were talking about comes in. I don't have a constraint to define me to get started. So I'm like, okay, I'm holding the brush, I'm holding the paper. Oh my God. I have no roadmap that I can see.
Oh,
if
man.
If you show me the corners, I will create a path.
See, I thrive in that. I totally want that. And I want more of it. Oh, I wish I could have more of it.
I mean, those are the passion projects that we want, right? And that's the thing that when you feel frustrated, I think it comes in handy to have these passion project outlets that your current rent-paying job isn't, it's just a means to an end. And you still get to do something that you love instead of, something that's, you're not doing accounting. You're not serving,
Nothing wrong with being an accountant. We're just putting that out there. We all need accountants.
Of course. Well, I love my accountant. But from a perspective of saying we're not number people, we're creatives.
Yes.
We have ideas, and we have this output that needs to come out of literally physically from your chest and out into the world. It still is a way of putting that out there. It may not be in exactly the form that you want. So then that's what you do. That's how you balance that with your passion projects. You put that out there. That's what this podcast is for us. Don't you think so?
I do.
I have client projects going on right now, and it's a back and forth process of like, oh my God, these projects, it's not exactly what I want to do. So it's taking away from the podcast that I can focus on. But if I had no client projects, I would not be so thrilled about them.
This wouldn't exist. No, it's the truth. It's the truth.
And we would have nothing to talk about because,
We'd have plenty to talk about.
Yeah, that's true. We never run out of that. But we wouldn't have these like tangents of saying, the client expectations versus this or that. Having this wholesome practice is you're not an island. You don't create in a vacuum. For your passion project to flourish, also, I do think that you need to interact with different types of projects where certain constraints are imposed on you. It does force you to be creative and inspire you to, maybe out of frustration, maybe out of inspiration, to create. I think that's valuable.
Perfect. Hello and welcome back to GATSBY Fridays. Sarah, we're going to talk about resources. For me, what I am able to do is sometimes if I don't know what the end result of a project is, I try not to give myself the anxiety of knowing the final outcome of anything. What I do is I lean more on the process. And what that means, you put systems in place that you can count on that get you towards your goal.
Your support system.
Your support system. So when I'm working with a team, I hire people that are hopefully good at what they do, and I hire them for their expertise in knowing what the overall vision that I give them would be, and we all work towards that goal. Sometimes I truly don't know what the end of the race is going to be, but I know if I keep on working towards that with the processes that I have in place, I'll eventually get to it.
You're talking about like specific project-related anxiety, though. What about in the broader sense where you're looking at your career and you're at this job, and then there are things that you want to accomplish, and then it kind of gives you, we're all creatives, we're all sensitive at a different level that sometimes I look and I'm like, where is my career going to? I'm not where I thought I would be. Things are not what it's supposed to be. I have no control over life. I don't get to take the jobs that I want to. It's not necessarily just project specific. We're trying to reach an outcome with the boundaries or not, like we talked about earlier. It's about a bigger take on your creative existence.
So what I am able to do, I've been fortunate to have full-time healthcare. I've been able to see a therapist over the last 15, 20 years, and the therapy that I've been able to utilize is a system that's more geared towards artists. I work with a person who really understands artists and understands the artist's mind. And
that's great.
And she's wonderful. And she is herself an artist, is able to understand what it means to kind of go through creative blocks and how to move past them, and more importantly, how to move past the anxiety that artists face. And I can only speak from my own experience that my creative blocks often have to do with limitations. So giving imposed limitation. So what I do to move past that is give myself more projects to do.
You need to elaborate on that. So what type of things imposed on you block you, and how do you come over that?
So sometimes you have a creative block where you just are flat out depleted of ideas. and you don't know which direction to take a project. Obviously that's going to cause a lot of anxiety, especially if your livelihood depends on it. And what I do is, once again, it's about leaning on a process of knowing what worked in the past, what newness you need to bring to a project, combine those two things, and move it into a direction.
And how did you? So I'm gonna have to ask you this because as someone who does not have full-time employment type of healthcare, finding a therapist has been next to impossible. And I have a very expensive health plan that I pay out of pocket for. And this is a reality for freelance creatives out there.
Yes.
That how did you? I mean, even within the full-time healthcare system, how did you find the right person? Because the person it sounds like a unicorn to me.
So once again, it has to deal with whatever health plan.
Yes,
you
of
have,
course. They have
and
to be
who's
in that network,
within that network.
But within that network, the fact that you found someone that caters to creative needs and understand that is very exceptional.
Requires a lot of research. It requires a lot of research into finding. I'm not going to go through my history, my history of therapy, but in order to find this one particular person, I've had to go through many, and I also not just go through many, but also go through many types and forms of therapy.
Of course.
I'm not going to lay out all the different forms. It's just a matter of this was the one that worked best for me, for who I was.
Yeah, I mean, I've had therapists over time. When I had full-time employment, I went to therapy more consistently, and I've had different therapists also, different approaches. You know, there's the carrot type of person and then the stick type of person. I'm definitely not the stick type of person, and I actually react adversely to that. More recently, because I'm on my own, I have a once-a-month therapy with someone that's overseas. It's a little bit more mystical, but at the core of the sessions that we have, it still feels like it's nothing kooky. It's just she really talks about how to connect with me on the things that I should be doing that I'm in denial about.
What type of advice does she give you?
Well, my creative block isn't necessarily how to find the solution. I have this tendency of like seeing what I need to do, and it's so painful to put it out. I just stop myself. It
causes paralysis?
It causes a little bit of a paralysis, and I can't get it out. I know what I need to do, and if I start doing it, it starts flowing out, but that first couple of steps is almost physically painful to put out. And I don't mean it physically painful like I'm standing and my back hurts. It's like it comes out of my body, my bones, to put it out into the paper, onto the trackpad or whatever it is. The way that we talk about it, I'm like, well, I have all these things and it's on my mind, and then like part of my creative process is I think about things in the back of my mind all day long. When I have to put it out, I may not be working on your project specifically for a week, but that doesn't mean that it's not in the back of my mind. When I sit down, it comes out.
Yes. And
that's because I'm walking down the street and I'm thinking about it. But the fact that sitting down and getting it out is a painful process for me. Like, she's worked with that on me, saying, like, that's not, you're making it harder on yourself. There's a lot of ways to, like, that she helps me. I mean, it's a Skype session. So there's, now that through the pandemic,
yes, that's a good point to bring up.
Teletherapy. And we were doing it way before the pandemic like this because she's overseas, but it's been incredibly helpful to me. I respond to my BS being pointed out to me, but not in a, finger wagging way, more of a, how about you do it this way?
It's constructive. It's constructive. Also, it's about course correcting.
Yes.
I think.
So, like, she's like, well, you're just hiding. You just need to put it out there. I'm like, I know. I don't want to talk about it, but I do. So that's the way that she's been helping me a lot. So, yes, I do believe that there is more than one type of therapy out there. So I couldn't find the right person. I spent days every year I have a new health plan, because the individual health plans you can purchase are different for every year. And then I go through that, and it takes time, and then it takes time for their thing to kick in. The 1st January, you're basically useless.
Oh, yeah.
Like, all of that. And I'm like, well, if I had a consistent job and over the years, unless the company changes a huge significant human resources structure, your healthcare stays somewhat consistent, at least. Some doctors come in and go out. But for me, every year I have a new primary, means that I have new needs for therapy. And that makes it really exhausting. It takes so much time. So, I mean, you find some outlet. One of my favorite therapists in the past, I found through back in the day when guilt was a big deal, Guilt City. She was putting out this yoga therapy sessions. I thought I was applying for 3 sessions of special personalized yoga sessions, and it turns out she's like, "Why are you here? Why do you think you need therapy?" And I'm sitting on the couch, and I'm like, "I thought I was here for private yoga sessions." But she was so good at pinpointing that the things that I put out on the table that after 3 sessions, I was like, okay, I'll come in. And I started seeing her as a therapist once every other week for 3 years until she moved to Australia. So.
Well, I wanted to talk about a platform that we've both have been to. It's sponsored through Working Not Working, and every couple of months they host a group creative therapy session. Now, we're not at liberty to speak on what is spoken in the sessions, but we could speak on the benefits of being around creative counterparts and discussing what it is that we're all dealing with when it comes to our profession, the anxieties that we feel being creatives in a professional space.
Struggles of how to find clients, struggles of not being able to find a job, struggles of being lost as a creative within a non-creative company if you're in-house. All of these, we've been exposed to a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, writers to directors, yes, to photographers, and Alex is in fashion and I'm in creative branding. So we've interacted with a lot of different people from different range of age. It's been an incredible experience to be part of a community where we could talk about safely about what we feel and our own struggles. And it's been extremely rewarding to be honest about the struggles of it. Then you realize you're not alone out there. So what I would say is if there's no talking, not talking in your city or in your where you can reach, I mean, no one's meeting in person right now.
No.
But there are communities that you can create.
Yes. It's helped us. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no. It's helped us incredibly. So I would say, I mean, that's such a unique experience because we're based in New York City. It's, of course, there's a lot more happening around that subject in New York that are specific to creative talent needs. But I feel like there's an opportunity to find each other and create your own little pockets.
Reach out to your creative counterparts, and yes, create smaller groups and bring those people together. If you're the type of person that can bring those people together, bring them together and discuss what it is that's troubling you in your specific field.
I mean, I connected with a graphic designer that's also going through immigration challenges of his own last week, that created this creative hub in Boston because he didn't have the same creative network that he used to have when he lived in New York. It's called Creative Huddle, creativehuddle.com.
It's a good one.
So yeah, and he started connecting people in his own city because he felt the need because he didn't have the same intensity of what he could get in New York City. So yes, we are in New York. We had access to this, but it's not the only resource and it's not the only way to connect with others. And I think talking about it without competing with each other, I think creating a safe environment to talk about it. It's not about who's going to get the next gig and are we competing for it. It's about what are you going through? What am I going through?
It's truly about being in community with other members of your creative world. And it's important to be speaking to those people because you want to gauge who's out there. And you know what? You are not alone. You are not alone in dealing with the issues that you feel that are only connected to you.
Yes, and after 2 years of attending, and not to every single one of them, but after 2 years of attending most of the Talking Not Talking was held in New York City, I can say it has given me certain perspective to say that I'm not alone in it. Owning up to my burnout was one of the things I got away from one of those meetings that I voiced my concern about passion projects, that I just felt like I did not want to do it anymore because the last thing I want to do is when I'm done with what I have to do is to do more. And the feedback I got was the first step is to acknowledge that you're burnt out, and that I will carry that forever because acknowledging the fact that I was already one step ahead than I thought I was. It comes from a supportive community, and I cherish that. And to realize that, okay, all right, so it's okay that I feel like I don't want to create anymore, but the fact that I'm recognizing that was like, okay, so that's not something that I need to fight anymore.
Exactly.
It's acknowledged, it's accepted by my peers that it's an anxiety, it's valid what I'm feeling.
There is a myth that all creatives are in competition with each other. And that's not true.
I mean, that's part of what we wanted this podcast to be out for. Yes, we feel like we have our own opinions, but the point is to bring a conversation out into the creative community.
Into the larger world.
Yeah. So I have an opinion, Alex has an opinion, and then whoever's listening has different opinions. Come tell us, because the whole point is to connect with each other.
We value your opinion.
Welcome back to GATSBY Fridays. Before we get into our favorite recipe part of our episode, I want to talk about how what we put on our bodies affect how we feel. As creatives, we feel so much. I feel like it's just kind of
so much.
We feel intensely. We feel
passionate.
We feel passionate. The creative process is so personal. It comes from your blood and bones. So I do feel like there's an aspect where sometimes talking isn't enough. And for me, my anxiety, sometimes I feel it's so physically overwhelming that I need to take medication to be able to manage the physical repercussions of how I'm feeling, so that no longer gets in the way of me either getting work done or being productive. Sometimes the physical aspect of the anxiety is so overwhelming that it gets in the way of me being productive. I try to manage that with CBD. Most of the time, it's legal in most states, and I'm not advocating that it's good for everyone or anything. This is just my personal how I manage it. And I also have prescription medication that I take occasionally when I do feel really overwhelmed physically, that the world is sitting on your chest feeling, that I need the world to stop sitting on my chest so I can actually work and concentrate on the work. This is only to say that, yes, find your community, talk to people, but also when talk isn't enough, talk to your doctors and look for solutions, because everybody has different needs. And there's different ways out there to alleviate the pain that we all go through.
We want to make sure that everyone understands that there is talk therapy and all the therapy that one needs to get through the anxieties or the issues that they're going through creatively. And sometimes you need to also supplement that with medication. You need to speak to your doctor.
You can ask for help, and that help can come in. There's no stigma around taking medication.
No, there isn't. Of course not, yeah.
So I wanted to leave this conversation in saying that this is what I do to manage my anxiety. Everybody does differently. There's two sides of this coin that we want to be very conscious of. There is the part that we're not advocating for anything, substance abuse, but we're also advocating against the stigma of taking medication because it helps.
Absolutely. I think typically this part of the episode we discuss a signature cocktail, and we wanted to make sure that we cover all bases, not only just a cocktail, but also just making sure that everyone understands that there are options that you do have out there to take care and to alleviate your anxiety.
I mean, yeah, I love my cocktails. That's why we have the cocktail session. We both love our cocktails.
Absolutely.
But I'll be honest, when I'm not feeling my best, when I drink, it doesn't make me feel better. I'm more of a happier, social person when it comes to my cocktails, that I feel good, then I'm happy to drink. And this has been pointed out by therapists in the past for me in two different ways. And the first one was, that's not good for you, and I didn't respond well to that one. The other one was, do you think this impacts the way that you're feeling if you're not feeling already not so great? And I was like, no, that's not the case. And 3 days later, I was like, yeah, I was already not feeling great, and I was out with friends, and I had a couple of drinks, and that just really compounded how I was feeling. So I'm now very conscious of when I'm not feeling so great, not to be drinking. Not to say that that's the right thing for anyone, but for me, I have to be very conscious of this. From that perspective, I still want us to have a cocktail because the spirit of it is to celebrate it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to have alcohol in it.
Exactly. You do what you feel is best for you and your situation. But since this is Gatsby Fridays, and at the end of each episode we do offer a cocktail, we are just going to offer different options for you. And one option is a non-alcoholic beverage.
Well, there's a whole trend about it now.
Yes.
being sober curious prompted a huge trend out of the industry to provide cocktails that are as complex in terms of flavor and depth and scent, a full experience of a cocktail without the alcohol component.
I was completely unaware that there's a whole genre of cocktails that are non-alcoholic based. Surprise, surprise. I'm just learning about this.
It's a cocktail that has everything except the alcohol in it.
What we're going to point out is just a few of the brands that we've become aware of, or that I've become aware of recently. One is out of the US called Curious Elixirs. Another one is out of Australia called Liars. There's others that are out of Italy called Memento. And these are all cocktail mixers that are within the taste complexity of actual alcohol, which I find fascinating.
So yes, we are going for a gin and tonic that is not a gin and tonic. There's more brands too. There's Lip, there's Kin. There's so many of them now. It's been, I think this trend has been going for like about 2 years now, that the market is many options.
And aren't there now gatherings?
Oh yeah, there are sober curious gatherings.
Sober curious gatherings, that's what they're called. Seems to be a trend.
There are gatherings. There's also like, the 7 a.m. parties with headphones on. That it's like that they don't serve alcohol. You go to a dance party before you go out to work at 9 a.m. But because it's 7 in the morning, yeah, it's a whole new world out there.
Amazing.
It's a different world. Yes, there are sober curious events also. The thing I like about the non-alcoholic cocktails available is it owns the beauty of a cocktail recipe. That's what makes being so Gatsby is you put it in your little martini glass, you can have your little stir steak.
You garnish it.
You garnish it, and it takes no experience. You're not drinking club soda in a cup. When you go to a bar and ask for, I don't feel like drinking today, but I don't want anyone asking me, give me a club soda, they put it in a gigantic glass as if you're drinking water. I'm like, I just told you I want it to be discreet. I like the idea that these new brands are taking on the complexity of a cocktail, the depth of flavor, and the fragrance component, and catering to a need where you don't always have to get tipsy and drunk. I love my cocktails, but I am happy that there are options out there now. So that's our Gatsby moment today. Thank you for hanging with us. For a list of resources mentioned in this episode, hop onto our site, GATSBYFridays.com.
You can find a list of alcohol-free cocktails from around the world at our site, GATSBYFridays.com.
For show notes, or if you want to leave a comment, suggest a show topic, get us on our site.
Don't forget to rate us and give us 5 stars and write a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps to get us in front of more ears and build our audience. Or if you're a Spotify person, make sure you follow us at Gatsby Fridays.
Or on Instagram, follow us at Gatsby Fridays. Stay with us. On our next episode, we will tell you all about the Design Book Club. And this is Gatsby Fridays.